Hello and welcome to the Frankfurt Motor Show 2015. We are at the VW Group evening, and as you can see it's rather busy down here, but one of the stars of the show is this. It's the Bugatti Vision Gran Turismo concept. Now, as the name suggests, it was designed for the Gran Turismo PlayStation game, and that got me thinking that, to be honest, it was all just pie in the sky. Until I had a chat with one of the designers. I'm going to have to chat to you through this car because it is absolutely extraordinary, all the aero and the basis, and I think once you understand that, it's a very, very cool thing. The basic architecture of the car is based around the quad-turbo W16 engine. Here, obviously, right in the centre of the car with a gearbox in front. That automatically pushes the seats very far apart. The car is designed, well, it's a tribute really to the 1937 Le Mans win with the tank car, which is obviously looked at aerodynamics long before a lot of other people were thinking about that sort of thing. The colours hark back to that, this wonderful sort of dark blue, light blue, and then some of the lines on the car work with that too. The line straight over the top and then the line here in the side, this big horseshoe, all sort of, they evoke typical Bugatti design features, but the technology I think is what's really interesting, and the way they've integrated those into making this car extremely fast. If we look around the front of the car, we've got the horseshoe grille, which is obviously the area of highest pressure, feeding straight into the radiators. We've got dive planes at the front here as well, And also notice the headlights, which are just completely exposed. The air can flow straight through those. So we'll come back to that in a minute. The idea, as I said, is that this car runs at Le Mans. That's what it's designed for. So they reckon they can hit over 400 kilometers an hour 4 times around the lap. So between the chicanes on the Mulsanne Straight and then down to Indianapolis as well. In order to get to that sort of speed, I mean, you've got a huge amount of grip. You need to stall the rear wing. But when you do that, obviously you've got to somehow do something about the downforce at the front as well. So there are vents under there that then open just to balance the pressure front and rear. The other thing is you've got huge side plates at the back. That's to keep the car stable at such high speeds. If you're going to be doing over 400 kilometers an hour 4 times a lap, the brakes are obviously going to get a huge workout. So as I mentioned before, the lights there, air flowing straight through there to try and cool the brakes. The trouble is if you do that, then you create a huge amount of pressure potentially in the wheel arch. So down the side here, they've really cut away the front arches to vent all that air out of the back. Around the back of the car, we've got lots of very cool things going on. Obviously, there's this really wide, thin rear light, which just looks amazing. And you've got the exhausts. There's no number plate on this car, obviously, because it's not designed for the road. But they can be mounted up here, out of the way of the diffuser, which creates a huge amount of downforce just on its own. It runs all the way underneath the engine. Talking the engine, it's obviously very open at the back here. So the air comes here, it helps attach to there, therefore creating downforce on the underside of the rear wing. But then also kicks up here, and that helps to drag all the air out of the engine, helping to cool it. The exhaust, by the way, titanium with powder coating on the inside, which is very, very cool. All the other metal bits you can see are aluminium, as you expect from Bugatti. Frustratingly, Bugatti isn't really giving out any details. Every time I ask for power or another sort of figure, they just said, oh, I'm sorry, we can't really say that. So all we really do know is 2 tons of downforce and that top speed figure. It's worth spending a minute just looking at the wheels and tyres on their own. They're beautiful for a start. Centre locks. You've got a carbon rim, 22-inch on the front, 21-inch in the rear. Huge. The tyres as well, they're specially made slicks. They had to do a lot of persuading for Michelin to make these because they're not made anywhere else. So 380mm on the rear, 280mm on the front, on the slick, just so it can put all the power down. You might be wondering, it's a carbon rim and then an aluminium magnesium alloy for the spokes. Why is that? Well, because the car, as I mentioned before, is stopping 4 times a lap around Le Mans from over 400 kilometers an hour, it needs to dissipate the heat from the carbon brakes. Now, if you have carbon spokes, it can't do that. If you've got an aluminium hub, it can dissipate the heat through that into the spokes, and then obviously the air going past that cools the spokes. They've managed to make them, they say, as light as it would be if it was carbon spokes. And yeah, they look extremely cool. It's worth mentioning as well, they're running 3 degrees of camber on the front and rear, just to give it absolute precision. There are so many other details on this car. I could go on and on. You've got the cameras here, 3 cameras that merge into one picture so you can see what's going on behind, because it's so important during a sort of a lap of somewhere like the Mans. Not that I can see many cars catching this. The little red details, all the safety features, because if there's an accident, then you need to be able to know where to get the doors open, fire extinguishers, all that sort of thing. There's a panel on the top. If you need to get the driver's helmet off, if you had a back injury or something like that, that panel comes off. All these things are being thought about. Side impact as well. There's something about the fastidiousness of Bugatti that we've seen in the Veyron that is then being put into this concept. It's something you just don't generally see in concepts, this level of detail, I suppose, and it is absolutely amazing to look at. The Veyron has always been quite a sort of demure design, I suppose, and it's like it suddenly reached its teenage years and just morphed into this and gone utterly wild. But I love the fact that for all the fact it was designed for a computer game, there is real engineering know-how behind it all. So let us know what you think of Bugatti's concept. Leave your comments on the box below, but also on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, and we'll try and answer them before the end of the show. Brilliant, crazy, should they build it? What should this sort of say for the next generation Veyron, the Chiron?
The Valkyrie, the ultra-rare, ultra-expensive, ultra-exclusive mid-engined hypercar. But what if there was a car which gave something between that and the rest of the Aston Martin range? Well, here it is. It's called the AMRB 003. RB because Red Bull are still involved. It is still very exclusive. 500 will be made. Very expensive. We think about £1 million, but we're not entirely sure yet. Why does it sit between the Valkyrie and the rest of the range? Well, because Aston Martin is not just launching one new mid-engine car at Geneva, it is launching two. There is the Vision Vanquish concept, a production car, unlimited series production car that will arrive in 2022. Right, let's start with the 003 because it's where I am, and let's start at the front because that's also where I am. You may notice this badge is not a fixed badge, it is acid etched because that saves weight, and this car is predominantly about track performance as much as anything else. So when you look at its design, it is not as pleasingly perhaps styled as the Vanquish because it is about going rather quickly. With no vents at the front, you can see quite a long way underneath the car. A lot of this car's aerodynamics happens underneath it, but you can't see from front to back like you could on a Valkyrie. There's a reason for that. One of the reasons is because, although Aston is still deciding where exactly to put the batteries, the chances are some will go underneath the floor. This car is a hybrid, and as well as the new 3-litre twin-turbocharged V6 being hybridised, there is also a hybrid element to the front axle. So it is a four-wheel drive car. As you move further back, you may notice that the doors swing up kind of dihedrally rather than gullwing fashion as a Valkyrie. That makes it a bit easier to get in and out of. We'll come to the interior in a moment. Behind that, this is where that engine and gearbox and hybridisation will sit. You can't see out the back of it. There is a camera system that does work instead. And underneath here is Aston Martin's first Aston designed, Aston engineered, Aston built engine since quite a long time ago. And finally, you come right at the back to a carbon fibre spoiler. So the wing doesn't actually lift up itself. There are actuators within the carbon fibre wing itself, so it moves. It's incredibly clever aerospace technology. Now this car's about 2 years from production, but it does have a slightly representative interior. So let's have a look inside. So welcome to the interior. There is so much to tell you about in here. It is extraordinary. So I'm sitting in a leg up driving position, a bit like the Valkyrie, I think, to that extent, but there's more room in here. There's more shoulder room, there's more elbow room, there's more headroom, and that's allowed because it's not a car that is trying to hit that 1,000-kilogram curb weight of the Valkyrie, but there are similarities. To keep the cockpit narrow, frontal area is really key to performance. So instead of my view out being ended by the A-pillars, the pillars come halfway down, and actually this, I get a brilliant view. I think in terms of placing the car on the road, or more likely on a track, that'll be really quite cool. There is a fixed H point, so I'm sat right here, but the seat back does go upright and the pedals and wheel will come to me rather than me going to them. And the general interior ambience is extraordinary, really extraordinary. Aston says, quite rightly, it wouldn't be appropriate if there was lashings of wood and leather in a car like this. Instead, it's a much more minimal thing, and instead of having individual vents plopped here and there, you get this real big sweeping swage of 3D printed carbon all around the outside, and the loudspeakers for the stereo and the vents will be filtered into that. Finally then, what do you do with all of the infotainment system that would sit on a big chunk in the middle of the car? Well, it's still to be decided, and Aston's having these conversations with customers and stakeholders, as I think the corporate speak. Given that your smartphone does so much of this stuff anyway, why not just put everything through that rather than have a big bank of panels that will become redundant in a couple of years anyway? It's a fabulous driving environment. It's just like no Aston before, but it makes absolute perfect sense. And this then is the Vanquish Vision concept. This is not a limited run production car. This is the car that sits at the top of Aston Martin's 7-strong range. This completes effectively Aston Martin's second century plan, and the idea is you have 7 models and you replace one every single year, and once it's finished you start again. This sits at the top of the sporty range. It will go up against whatever Ferrari's 488 replacement is called and whatever the McLaren 720S has become by that point. The engine is in the middle. It is this V6 twin turbocharged car of unspecified capacity and unspecified power. We don't have a huge amount of details on it so far. I can tell you it will be hybridised, it will be rear wheel drive, but as befits a car that fits in with a regular range, so some of the design cues you will be slightly familiar with already, such as this strip that sort of blends the front and the wings. It has these expressive haunches that you might remember from the current Vanquish S, as well as the lip at the back and the big chrome strip around the rear. Hard to imagine really, when you've seen Astons of the last 20, 30, 50 years, that this car will be on the road in just 3 years' time. So we'll have loads more on these cars, we'll have loads more from the Geneva Motor Show, we'll have loads more on all cars from everywhere. We're here all the time. So if you
LC convertible concept. Imagine the LC in its most breathtaking form. Experience amazing.